All right, who here remembers and loves and adores the memory of consumers distributing in Canada? I know I do. And that was really the first Amazon. Think about it. They were way ahead of their time. You had the opportunity to order anything you wanted at a desk. You had to go there, but once you got to that desk, you opened that catalog, you placed the number in the little form and gave it to the person behind the counter. It came magically from the back. Some of the smallest retail locations you could have imagined, and somehow they had everything in the back. Unfortunately, they were way ahead of their time. And if they had just waited till the time Amazon came around, they might have been okay today. But we are seeing this with Canadian retail across this country, most recently with Hudsons Bay Company. But could the government have done more to help here? Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
A new court filing shows Hudsons Bay will begin liquidating the 6 stores initially spared from closure in Toronto and Montreal. Because the company isn't optimistic it will find a buyer.
Welcome back to Bakes on Things. We are going to go well beyond consumers distributing today in discussing what I can't believe just happened in Canada. One of the most historical retail franchises in North American history, let alone Canada, has closed. And it's the Hudsons Bay Company. Yes, it's been around since before Canada existed. And yet it now is part of the another one bites the dust crowd. Hudsons Bay Company, one of the oldest retailers in the entire continent, has collapsed. And with it goes another piece of Canadian heritage. Now, how many more of these things do we need to happen? Do we need to lose before we realize this isn't just a business issue? It's a national crisis. Retailers like Sears, Zellers, Reitmans, Le Château, HMV, all gone. Now, the Bay. And it's not just department stores, it's entire malls going dark. Downtown cores have been hollowed out for years. Community jobs continue to vanish daily. Hudson's Bay wasn't just a store. It was a symbol of Canada, a link to our founding history, the kind of place your parents shopped, your grandparents remembered, and now your kids never will. Many of these stores and flagship stores were in heritage buildings.
Signs say everything must go, but an effort is underway to save at least some of what's hanging at the Bay.
What I'm engaged in trying to do is ensure that those memorials don't get lost in the shuffle of the liquidation.
War memorials for Hudson's Bay employees are found at the downtown stores in Calgary and Toronto, each inscribed with the names of dozens of people who worked at the iconic Canadian franchise and died at war. Shea is a Toronto lawyer and secretary of the 48th Highlanders of Canada. He wants to preserve the stories of the fallen.
Now more than ever before, or in recent memory anyway, our national identity is being challenged. And these individuals, they helped forge that identity and preserve it. We have to remember.
The collapse of Canadian retail is death by 1,000 cuts. Foreign megacorps like Amazon and Walmart cannibalizing market share, sky-high rent for physical stores, and slow death of walk-in foot traffic, and a government too busy virtue signaling through public broadcasting corporations and budgets to notice an economic earthquake right under their feet. And you know what gets me the most here, guys? While our retail sector, an actual economic engine of jobs, crumbled over the last decade, the federal government found billions to prop up their media pet project and mouthpiece, the CBC. Since 2015, the Liberals have poured over $1.2 billion per year into the CBC. In the 2025 election campaign, Mark Carney even promised an additional $400 million in new funding. That's nearly $15 billion in taxpayer money over a decade to support what amounts to a government-subsidized propaganda platform, while actual Canadian businesses like Hudsons Bay Company were left twisting in the wind to fail. Now, let's think of it this way. Imagine you're a small or mid-sized Canadian retailer or business watching all of this happen. You're struggling to keep your staff. Your lease is bleeding you dry, and e-commerce demands infrastructure that you can't afford, and you're told there's no help. Meanwhile, the government is busy writing giant checks to a broadcaster with 2 executive floors in Toronto, a government endorsed narrative, and dwindling ratings at the best of times. So, what could we have done with $15 billion, do you think? And let me be clear, I'm not talking about freebies here. I'm not talking about non repayable bailouts to businesses and stores. Retailers should have to pay back once they recover. But here's what we could have done instead of spend on the CBC: a national retail restructuring fund offering low interest repayable loans to help Canadian retailers modernize their operations and stay in business to compete with the big corporations like Amazon and Walmart. Targeted lease support for small retailers and struggling shopping centers to keep the struggling shopping centers open and keep them in business during downturns. Grants to retrofit stores for e-commerce integration and digital retail transformation. You might not have as much foot traffic, but if you're equipped to send the product out, you're doing okay. A national buyback retail campaign, local traffic rewards shoppers for spending at home, give discounts for people who visit the stores. A municipal partnership program would work to revive abandoned mall properties into mixed-use community hubs. Let's expand on that a little bit. That restructuring fund could have helped Hudson's Bay. It could have helped Hudson's Bay digitize its inventory system years earlier. And lease support could have prevented the shuttering of flagship stores in cities where those buildings now sit empty, even some of them, as I said before, heritage buildings. Grants for e-commerce, well, that could have made mid-tier brands like Reitman's, Le Château, or Tip Top competitive against global giants. And a national campaign to drive local traffic, remember how we're doing that now? That's not just advertising. It's a cultural shift, a reminder to Canadians that shopping locally doesn't just support a business, it supports your neighbor, your community, your country. And you don't need Donald Trump's tariffs to make this an incentive. It should have been done years ago. Instead, we wrote checks to the CBC and called it culture. Meanwhile, actual culture, the businesses that define our communities, were completely abandoned by this government. This wasn't just market forces. It was policy neglect. It was a government choosing legacy headlines over legacy employers, choosing to bankroll their own message machine instead of backing communities that needed it most. Disgusting. So here's the question. If Mark Carney and the Liberals can spend billions of dollars to keep the CBC afloat, why not the Bay? A company here before we even were. Why not Zellers? Why not your local Canadian business who's struggling? Where's the bailout for all of them? $15 billion, Mark? Because propping up Canadian retail would have created dignity, purpose, jobs, real economic movement. But CBC? That's just noise control. If the government can print money to protect itself by controlling the message, but not to protect the people it claims to serve, it's no wonder we don't have a self-sustaining economy. Who are we really serving here? Because from where I'm standing, it's not you as a citizen. We need a retail revival, not through handouts, but through investment, measurable, targeted, conditional. If you take the funds, you restructure, you retain jobs, you stay Canadian, and when you make it out, you pay it back. That's not socialism, that's stewardship. That's economic protection. But we'll never get that as long as our leaders are more concerned about their coverage than their corner store. All right, we'll take a little moment to do our What the Maple segment right now, because this is again becoming so important. And let's not end on despair here. We can hope that Canadian retail will get some help in the end, but let's end on what can happen when Canadians do step up for themselves, even. I want you to meet Ian Fultz, who's a comic book artist and entrepreneur who's not just dreaming, he's building. Ian is launching or has launched a brand new series called The Mana Chronicles, complete with merchandise, apparel, and an entire online platform. You can find it all at www.elpmerch.com. I'll make sure that's in the comments here as we want to support small business. He's not receiving grants from the government. He's using Canadian creativity to build Canadian business. And folks, that kind of thing deserves our support. Check it out, share it, and support a guy who's making his own headlines as an artist and an entrepreneur, one illustrated page at a time. Congratulations on your business, Ian. All right. To wrap this up, I want you to comment below. I want your opinion on Canadian retail. I want your opinion on supporting it. What Canadian store from your childhood do you miss the most? And if you think it's time we support small business over bloated bureaucracies, share this video. Because if we keep letting Canadian retail die on the vine without a fight, don't be surprised when we wake up in a country that only sells foreign goods and government narratives. A place we thought we were already going because we were. It turns out the Donald Trump threat has only awoken us to a really big problem in this country. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things. I'm Chris Baker, and we'll catch you next time.